Welcome, everybody, back to my channel. I am joined by the illustrious Jordan tonight to talk about a book she has not read entitled African Genesis by Robert Ardrey. Specifically, my interest in this came from its known influence, if you read the interviews of Stanley Kubrick, upon his work. And I'm going to try to illustrate that influence and extrapolate upon it. I think this is going to be a two-part series. I make reference and allusion to other texts in the series of books that you see here on the title slide, The Territorial Imperative, The Social Contract, and The Hunting Hypothesis. I'm currently in the midst of listening to The Territorial Imperative, so I think I'm going to follow up and address some of the issues that I raise in this presentation with a part two, perhaps in the next week or so. So we'll see how fast I get through it. What are your expectations about this presentation, Jordan? I mean, I gave you a little bit of a heads up earlier today. I've not looked at my notes since this morning, so we'll see how this goes. But do you have any sort of expectations?
Well, what you said, we were talking earlier today, and you were saying, I'm not quite sure if this is correct, but it's interesting. And I think that is the frame of mind I'm coming into all of this with.
Well, which part did you think was not? What did you think I meant by I don't know if this is correct or not? The fact that Kubrick was deeply influenced by Ardrey, or Ardrey's understanding of evolution?
The second.
Okay.
The second. I don't know how airtight the influence on Kubrick is. It seems pretty, if not directly, it seems indirectly very clear. Like the ideas present themselves in the works. You might have more information to share with us about specific references. Yeah. But it's the second part. Well, kind of similar with Fraser. It's like, this is interesting. Is the theory airtight? Maybe, maybe not. But really the bigger point is these were influential ideas and you see them permeating the symbology in the movies.
Most definitely. Well, let's get into it. And when we close, let's revisit that question. And I would like to hear your verdict or your judgment about how convincing the narrative is that Ardrey presents and what Kubrick is saying about it, even if it's incomplete. All right. So let's get into it. We'll stay here on slide 1. And let's start with some background information on the connection between Robert Ardrey and Stanley Kubrick. So Robert Ardrey lived from 1908 to 1980. He was a versatile American playwright, screenwriter, and author. And he reshaped mid-20th century thought with his provocative works on human evolution, profoundly influencing Stanley Kubrick's cinematic vision of violence and instinct. Renowned for plays like Thunder Rock from 1939 and screenplays such as The Green Years, 1946, Ardrey gained lasting prominence with African Genesis in 1961, which introduced the killer ape hypothesis. Drawing on Raymond Dart's Australopithecus africanus findings, Ardrey argued that aggression, tool use, and territoriality drove human evolution, challenging romanticized notions of inherent peacefulness. His accessible yet rigorous synthesis of paleontological and ethological research, including Konrad Lorenz's animal behavior studies, sparked debates in anthropology and psychology, asserting that primal instincts like competition and loyalty shape modern society. This revolutionary thesis, revolutionary for the time, it may not seem that way to us now, urging humanity to confront its animal origins, inspired Kubrick's 2001: A Space Odyssey, where the dawn of man sequence mirrors Ardrey's vision of violent origins and resonates in A Clockwork Orange, The Shining, and Full Metal Jacket. Ardrey's later works, The Territorial Imperative from 66 and The Social Contract from 70, further explored territoriality and social dynamics, cementing his impact on Kubrick's portrayal of humanity's dual-natured ingenuity, starkly opposing Rousseau's idealism. Jordan, you have a little bit of a background in political science and political theory. Do you recall generally what Rousseau's view of the state of nature is?
Oh man, I would really need a refresher on whose social contract theory is whose. More recently is watching Lost.
Right. Well, essentially, I mean, I mean, to sum it all up, I mean, Rousseau in general is an individual that believes in the noble savage theory, right? Like the idea that generally, like, man is tabula rasa, peaceful, this idealized version of the human individual, and it is society that corrupts us. And Kubrick is going to be arguing in op-eds and elsewhere that no, like, that nature is red in tooth and claw. I believe to is that Blake that I'm referencing there, that it's brutal, it's short, and really it comes from the ingenuity of carnivorous and homicidal apes. Like, this is where it comes from. And society, in a way, is trying to civilize humans out of those primal instincts rather than leading to its degradation. So it's really a question about origins and if we're ascending or descending. And Kubrick's going to see us as ascending from this murderous ape rather than descending from an idyllic state via society. And that's going to have all sorts of lasting reverberations. Yeah. And I think of the other political theorists, although I've not done this mapping, I think Ardrey would probably be most identified with Hobbes.
That sounds more or less true. Though it's been a long time since I have cracked open those books.
Well, I had the opportunity for this presentation to listen to Rousseau's Emile, and which was a pretty influential work on Kubrick as well. And I finally got around to it. I recommend it to individuals that are raising children to get some insight in that. But it would seem probably to the modern sensibility to be remarkably outdated. So let's go to slide 2 and talk a little bit about Emile, Rousseau, Ardrey, and Kubrick. Okay? Yeah. So on the screen here, I have, in slide 2, I have an op-ed that Kubrick wrote, and it's titled "Now Kubrick Fights Back," from the February 27th, 1972 edition of the New York Times. There's also a Malcolm McDowell follow-up article in the same edition. It's on, you can find it easily on the internet. It's actually incredibly well written. It's amazing how great a writer Kubrick was, if you're not familiar with that aspect of him. So in his 1972 New York Times article, "Now Kubrick Fights Back," Stanley Kubrick defends his film A Clockwork Orange against accusations of fascism from critic Fred M. Hetchinger, articulating a worldview that aligns closely with Robert Ardrey's evolutionary theories while sharply rejecting Jean-Jacques Rousseau's philosophy. Kubrick expresses admiration for Ardrey's perspective, particularly from African Genesis and the social contract. By the way, Ardrey dedicates that to Rousseau, so I'm told. I have to get into it, though, more. Which posits that humans evolved from risen apes with innate aggressive instincts, not fallen angels corrupted by society. He finds Ardrey's view optimistic, celebrating humanity's rise despite its violent origins, and cites Ardrey to argue that Rousseau's belief in man's natural goodness is a romantic fallacy that distorts reality. Kubrick criticizes Rousseau's Emile for initiating an age of the alibi, falsely claiming that society alone corrupts an inherently happy and good human nature, a notion he deems pessimistic and hypocritical, leading to despair and illusion. He asserts that Rousseau's ideas, rooted in misconceptions about primal man's lack of society and innate nobility, have dangerously influenced moral and political philosophy. Kubrick's endorsement of Ardrey's evolutionary realism underscores his belief that acknowledging humanity's ignoble instincts is more truthful and constructive than Rousseau's idealized vision, shaping the satirical lens of A Clockwork Orange to explore violence and human nature without endorsing fascism. So, if anything, I mean, Clockwork Orange is a mighty critique of fascism, especially when I think he covers this in the article, but I don't need Kubrick to defend himself. I can't believe anyone would ever accuse Kubrick of being a fascist in Clockwork Orange, because it's a mighty critique of the state and the erasure of free will and turning individuals into automatons. That's what I think A Clockwork Orange means. Like, you're just like this wind up automaton. So the fact that anyone that would interpret Clockwork Orange as fascistic is laughable.
Yeah, it's strange. It feels like either. Do we know what fascism means anymore?
No, we don't, because the word is thrown around so much. But in 1972, I'd like to think that people had some conception of what that meant.
Sure. Yeah.
Maybe the critique, it was like, maybe there was some of the imagery that he objected to or something like that, but and missed the larger philosophical point. I've not read the original criticism that Hetchinger offered, but it's great, you know, and it's not in this response to Hetchinger. There's other authors that I plan on addressing as well. Kubrick name drops Arthur Kessler, who does The Roots of Coincidence and the Dark.
Yeah.
What are his other books? That's the one that I think of the most associated with Kubrick, because it's about parapsychology. He also talks about, who else is it? Well, Kessler's in there. I got to get back to it, but Kessler's in there. So it's not just Ardrey, but Ardrey is a major part of it. So, yeah, I guess we can go to the next slide unless you have something to say here.
No, I think I'm good.
Are you enjoying this thus far?
Yeah, I am.
Okay. All right, good. So, I just briefly on this, you know, I've been doing this with the Golden Bough. If individuals want to take a screenshot of this chart that I've put together here, and like I confessed to earlier, I've only read African Genesis so far, and kind of generally what it talks about. We get kind of the development of Ardrey's ideas throughout these other books. You know, the territorial imperative obviously has more to do with land claims, and the social contract, talking about social, you know, how we get hierarchies and social order, and ultimately we get a notion of how hunting shaped human evolution with the hunting hypothesis. And so I'm just kind of alluding to those here, but we'll get back to them. I think I've said enough about them so far, but if you wanted this to kind of jog your memory or keep something with you as we go through this, or for your own notes, take a screenshot of that. So how about slide 4, Jordan?
You got it.
Okay, so I'm going to talk, you know, it's obvious that Kubrick was deeply influenced by these evolutionary ideas. I mean, and I'm going to get into the more metaphorical sorts of things, but like, he seemed to have this preoccupation with the distinction between monkeys and humans, and blurring those lines, and seeing a primate as some larger symbol, as an icon that we need to contemplate. I have some theories I'm working on about this. I think a lot of it has to do with the trickster figure with Carl Jung, but you could see even as far back as 1946, you see this wonderful, wonderful photograph that he took for Look magazine entitled "How People Look to Monkeys in a Cage." And so even when Kubrick is 20 years old or 18 years old, was he 1926 or 1928? I have to look it up. But he's taking these wonderful photographs. And here, Jordan, what's great about this is that it reverses the roles, and it kind of makes the point, to Kubrick's point, that the monkey is the free one, and that the people are actually imprisoned, right? Not unlike how Alex in Clockwork Orange is the one who has his freedom annihilated through the Ludovico technique, and really the humans should be the ones on display. And I think that's so profound for a young man to pick up on and identify. And maybe it was just a synchronistic thing, and he didn't understand the meaning of it until he got deeper into his maturity and his work. But it's a wonderful, wonderful photograph. And then obviously you have the man apes touching the monolith in 2001. And then in 2001, we also have Vivian Kubrick asking for a bush baby for her birthday. Okay. And a bush baby is a type of monkey. And this gets into whole things like, feel free to wildly associate about what a bush baby would mean in connection to 2001, right? And then in Full Metal Jacket, we have this tent talk scene where I believe it's Joker talks about the Vietnamese Lunar New Year being in the year of the monkey. And if you look at the years of the monkey, 1968, when I believe that's when the Tet Offensive happened, which frames Full Metal Jacket happened in 1968, and also it was the release date of 2001, which came out on 4/2/1968. So this there is some sort of fixation with monkeys here. There's a much more, but I'm coloring within the lines right now. Something I found out listening to the Territorial Imperative today, I believe Ardrey's wife does these illustrations, and that's what that Bush baby image is from. So what do you think about this? Can you, I don't know, I probably left some out, but these are the obvious references to monkeys in Kubrick.
Yeah, I think this is a good roundup. It's clearly there.
Mm-hmm.
It's clearly there.
Yeah. I mean, what a strange thing. A little girl asking for a monkey, right? In a movie that takes place in the year of the monkey that involves monkeys touching a monolith. It's hello, like, use your pattern recognition. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. So let's go to slide 5, unless you want, do you think I forgot anything? I mean, what did you think about this photo, this Look magazine photo?
It's really interesting. I hadn't seen it before.
I think it's awesome.
Yeah.
I think it's awesome.
Yeah. They're all looking up. They're like not quite looking at him.
That's interesting. I hadn't thought about, we've got this one man like staring us dead in the eyes through the bars. But yeah, it seems to be activity above.
That's something I always pay attention to, is where are the subjects looking, to sort of project what is on the other side of the image. I also know it's something that Kubrick pays a lot of attention to.
Yeah.
When he's direct. Yeah.
Yeah, you're right to point out this man who's staring straight ahead. There's like parallelism between him and the monkey, which kind of perhaps like one could project onto it and be like, perhaps it's like they are tethered, like one is the avatar for the other, or perhaps there's a recognition or something like that. So that's cool.
Yeah, he's breaking the fourth wall. What I would add, or maybe ask you, is perhaps we get into this. What does the monkey symbolize more fully for Kubrick? Are we pulling on the young symbolism of the trickster? Is it just a stand-in for the pre-man or man prior to technology? What do you think this means?
Well, I think that's going to be a whole other thing about determining whether or not the monkey is the trickster for Kubrick via Young. I think that's a whole other layer to this. I think it's a polyvalent symbol and perhaps integrated with all these different ones. I'm not exactly sure how he mixes a Jungian understanding of evolution, at least through one's consciousness, which clearly is at work in 2001. He's talking about these ideas of primates. I'm not exactly sure Kubrick, he's playing with them artfully and he seems sympathetic to them, but how closely he marries his own beliefs to this theory, I think it's up for some debate, but it at least is a vestige of our previous nature. It's something and something to contemplate why the way we are. I guess an aperture into our psychology and our motivations and the chaos that we each personally have. Because that's a big part of what Kubrick's doing, is the disintegration of the mind, right? Like so much of what Kubrick is wrestling with is the regression of characters back into a bestial primal state, whether it's Jack in The Shining or Alex in Clockwork Orange or the grunts in Full Metal Jacket. They seem to be dehumanized. And what's at the core of a human when you take away that which society has imposed upon them? So,
yeah.
All right, let's go to slide 5, unless you want to say something else. So briefly, I just want to address, and you can screenshot this, Ardrey's theories were not universally accepted and still are quite contentious in some circles. So I just want to quickly address the criticism surrounding them. So his thesis in African Genesis ignited fierce controversy with its provocative killer ape hypothesis, asserting that humans evolved from aggressive, tool-using predatory ancestors. Critics challenged its scientific accuracy, arguing that Ardrey, a playwright lacking formal training, overstated the role of aggression in human evolution, oversimplifying evidence from Raymond Dart's Australopithecus findings and ignoring cooperation and social bonding, as emphasized by anthropologists like Ashley Montagu. The book's narrative-driven style, blending anecdotes with speculative claims, drew accusations of cherry-picking data and lacking rigor, particularly in chapters like The Weapon and The Carnivore, which exaggerated hunting and weapon use. Ideologically, Ardrey's rejection of the noble savage in favor of innate violence was criticized for echoing social Darwinism, potentially justifying warfare and inequality, and for reinforcing gender stereotypes by focusing on male-dominated hunting. Methodologically, his reliance on secondary sources and overgeneralizations from animal behavior to human societies was faulted for inaccuracy. Despite this, supporters, including Dart, praised Ardrey for challenging romanticized views and popularizing Africa as humanity's birthplace, a view later validated. The book's cultural impact, though significant, amplified debates about its fatalistic portrayal of human nature, with critics fearing it undermines social reform efforts in the 1960s, while modern science favors a more nuanced view of human evolution. African Genesis remains a polarizing milestone for its bold synthesis and public engagement with evolutionary theory. I mean, so there's a lot there to pick apart. I mean, I think one of the most interesting things is that you have the person who's popularizing this, like, he's a playwright, right? He's telling a story, and you have to be able to interpret data and provide a narrative structure. But like, that would be a big point of hesitation for me. And I think what's interesting about this is, I'm not committed to any sort of evolutionary biology theories. But it is interesting that if taken very seriously, it is kind of hard to mix with ethics and politics. So I don't really have the same problem, since I'm not really concentrating on the biological when I think about the state. Perhaps I should. Perhaps I'm making this romantic fallacy error, perhaps of a different kind. But that is an interesting paradox that I don't personally have to endure.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think similar to the Fraser stuff, this last point of clearly Ardrey has cultural significance. That's kind of why we're talking about these books. Not necessarily because they got the science totally right, but they made an impression. And I wonder how much of they're talking about Africa being validated as the cradle. You would have more context on what that means than I do here. But with a lot of more recent anthropological discoveries that are being brought to the mainstream, I would say by Graham Hancock, I'm not even sure how true that is today. So it seems every decade, kind of the way we look at the history of humanity shifts. I'm not sure how much of it is believable to me at all. I don't know.
Well, yeah,
it's not really something one on their own can truly validate or invalidate, and I'm okay with that. Like, I'm okay with a little bit of mystery about how humanity became what it is today.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think the thing, whether we're talking about Fraser or Ardrey or whatever, or we're talking about atoms, like whatever we're talking about, like ultimately, I think the thing that I want to drive home to people is that no one really knows. Like, these epistemological frameworks that we have are wildly provisional, and what is in vogue in science one decade is out the next. And I don't know why that is such a controversial idea. Like, if if anyone has problems with that idea, it just read Kuhn's History of Scientific Revolutions or whatever it's called.
Yeah, Thomas
And
Kuhn.
yeah, and that should be enough to contextualize the teleology, if there is a teleology, of science. And that book had a profound impact on me when I read it as a 20-year-old, and I have to say I feel like he got it right, and a bunch of other philosophers of science. I believe Popper is part of that conversation, perhaps Kripke.
Yeah.
So yeah, but to have a whole conversation about origins, I'm not prepared to do that right now. All I can really say is they found whales on the top of mountain ranges. So yeah, go do that. Go look at that. All right. Let's go to slide 6. And this is a general overview of what I'm going to talk about with much more detail. We're going to look at Ardrey's theories in regards to what I tried to do in the rest of the presentation was focus in on the weapons and the connection to 2001, Clockwork Orange, The Shining, and Full Metal Jacket, and kind of elaborated upon that, and then wove some like spicy hot takes in there as well. So I think we should just get into that. I'm going to address all these points that are in this chart, but again, if you want to take a screenshot and have something handy to refer back to later, go for that. So if we could go to slide 7, Jordan. And this is our good friend Moonwatcher throwing the bone as The Spake Zarathustra plays in 2001: A Space Odyssey. Okay, or actually, we might be after the song, but it's a whole thing. I'm gonna just read this, okay? You ready?
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm on the edge of my seat.
All right, here we go. Moonwatcher's bone toss in 2001: A Space Odyssey's Dawn of Man channels Robert Ardrey's killer ape hypothesis from African Genesis, tying tool use and aggression to human evolution. Its transition to orbiting spacecraft set to the Blue Danube, that's a waltz, evoking Britain's Blue Danube nuclear bomb. That was the first atomic weapon that the UK ever came up with, right? And so I think makes a pretty strong case that this satellite that we're looking at is a nuclear satellite that looks like the bone, right? Links primitive tools to modern threats, embodying Ardrey's dual-natured ingenuity. The bone, like cryptography, encoding and decoding information, doubles as a weapon or as a truth unlocker, while Moonwatcher's horse skeleton smash, beating a dead horse, critiques stale paradigms, urging transcendence via the monolith's screen-like enlightenment. His lunar gaze poses a choice. Does the 1969 moon landing's technological feat, advancing computing and space exploration, ignite consciousness despite risks like Hal's rebellion? Or is a fabricated landing woven with Kubrick's symbology a gifted bone weapon that, if properly used, unravels narratives and foments transcendence of primal instincts in favor of a Star Child-like rebirth? You know, I'm not, you're free to judge what's really going on here, but I think there's a lot happening with this bone throw. Think about it. He's throwing a bone, like Austin Powers, throw me a bone, right? That is to help somebody out. And we've got a layer to it. We've got an idiomatic expression. We're drawing on encoded language to give you a chance to understand what's really happening before your eyes. And I also say it's beating a dead horse. A lot of people go, well, Luke, that's not a horse that Moonwatcher is beating. That's a tapir, like a type of pig or something, or whatever they're called. But if you actually look, if you go and you find images of the skulls and do a little comparative analogy, you will find that that's a horse head. That's a horse skeleton. It's really, so it's going to teach you this whole throwing the bone and comparing. It's going to teach you to pay attention to the details. And it's going to arm you with knowledge. So you like Moonwatcher are going to go through this transcendent journey of being a dumb beast to a man to an initiated Gnostic Ubermensch or something, right? That's a whole thing. Hence why Nietzsche's Thus Spake Zarathustra Strauss song is being played at the beginning of 2001 as well. It's very tangled and deep, but clearly there's more than more than meets the eye here. You've got to pay attention to the metaphors, the expressions, the coding, all of it.
Very cool.
So, which raises a very interesting question about what a weapon is, right? A weapon's not just a blunt instrument or a sword cane or a rifle, right? Like, language is a weapon. Like, language is a tool. So use it. And we're using this visual language.
Yeah. I've never thought this before, but watching this on a loop, on repeat, it reminds me of the stereotypical at a graduation ceremony, like throwing up the hats.
Oh yeah, that's interesting.
It feels like that, and like it kind of looks like a diploma even, and
it does. That's very interesting.
You know, he's an ape, so he's all black, and it kind of looks like, you know, like wearing black robes.
Right.
Like it's a human in that suit. It's a human in like black garb.
Right. Right. That's very interesting, because a lot of people think that this is a movie that invokes Saturnian powers and a lot of people attach Saturnian energy to the graduation ceremony with the what's it called? Is it the mortar? Is that what it's called? I forget.
I don't even know.
Mortar board.
Yeah.
Because it's like it's an aspect of the cube.
Yeah, that's a whole thing. Like going into the all the regalia stuff.
Well, you know, in the book, the ultimate destination was not Jupiter. In the book, it was Saturn, and Kubrick said the reason why they changed it from Saturn to Jupiter is that he couldn't fake the rings, which is interesting because like 3 or 4 years later, there was the guy who did the special effects. What's his Douglas Trumbull? He did a movie called Silent Running where they go to Saturn. So, and the special effects were much weaker, in my opinion, than 2001. So, but also the switch from Saturn to Jupiter brings in this whole like mythological Battle of the Titans conversation, which is at work here. I've not fully explored that yet, but it's at work.
It brings a lot of attention to it as well. There's a few places where he switches up things from the source texts.
No.
Which this is not so much even a source text. It's a parallel co-creation.
That's right. Yeah. I don't even know if Arthur C. Clarke was fully aware of what was happening in the movie while he was writing the text. So it's a completely different experience. Okay. Shall we go to Clockwork Orange?
Yeah. Well, first off, I never would have put together the blue Danube, the nuclear weapon. I mean, sort of parallel, and what that means and what that unlocks for humanity. Yeah. Anyway.
Yeah.
Kudos.
I mean, yeah, it totally changes this whole thing, right? Like that's like deep research to know that the first UK atomic weapon is Blue Danube. Like we know like about the ones that the US dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Was it Big Boy and Thin Man or something like that? They're named after Dashiell Hammett character. They're named. I want to be sure. Let me ask Rock real quick. But they like everything's significant as far as let's see, what were the Japan atomic weapons called? They're named after Dashiell Hammett's The Thin Man. Mm-hmm. Come on, Grok. Our internet's a little slow.
Yeah, sorry.
It's all right. We'll have some music here that kind of moves things along. But yeah, I have to go deeper into and not to mention Dashiell Hammett was a detective novelist. So it's like when you realize that the weapons that were dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki come from detective works, it's like, hello, you have to be a detective here. One was called Little Boy, and that was dropped on Hiroshima August 6, 1945, and it was a uranium-based bomb, and that was the first weapon used. And Fat Man was dropped on Nagasaki on August 9th, 1945. And it was a plutonium-based bomb. I mean, I think the thing is crazy. And we're getting off topic a little bit. Do you know the name of the bomb that is at the center of Oppenheimer, the very first nuclear test bomb or atomic bomb test?
No.
Trinity. They named the first atomic weapon Trinity. Like, imagine the connotation of that, right? The weapon of ultimate destruction is named after the being that was responsible for the ultimate creation.
Mm-hmm.
And then, Oppenheimer reads the Bhagavad Gita and quotes, "I am death, the destroyer." Yep. Right? So wild. Crazy place we live in. Okay. Let's go to Clockwork Orange, if that's okay.
Yeah, you got it.
Okay. All right. So do you have little Alex up there?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. So Ardrey's killer ape hypothesis, positing that human evolution was driven by aggression, is reflected in Alex and his droogs' instinctual, ultra-violent acts such as rape, murder, and gang fights, repudiating Rousseau's noble savage idealism. The droogs' territorial control over urban spaces, battling rival gangs, mirrors Ardrey's amity-enmity complex, where group loyalty fuels hostility toward outsiders. Alex's love of Beethoven, alongside brutality, embodies Ardrey's view of human ingenuity as a dual nature, sublime creativity tethered to primal violence, while the Ludovico technique's fascistic control of primal instincts legitimizes Ardrey's call to manage them via art and sport. As an aside, Ardrey cites West Side Story, an African Genesis, as a supreme work of art, illustrating his thesis, praising its depiction of the Jets and Sharks' territorial struggles and switchblade violence as expressions of natural man's Australopithecine instincts, untouched by civilized inhibitions. Kubrick, likely aware of West Side Story's cultural impact and Ardrey's admiration, may have drawn on its stylized gang violence and tribal dynamics to shape A Clockwork Orange's droogs, whose choreographed brutality and territorial turf wars echo the Jets' balletic rumbles, adapting West Side Story's themes into a darker, Ardrey-inspired satire of humanity's primal nature. So I thought this was fascinating on a lot of different levels. Like, clearly we have, I think I've talked about this already, like we have little Alex who is forcibly civilized through the Ludovico technique, right? And what's fascistic about this is that it only cost him his sanity and his free will in order to do this. In a sense, like the Ludovico technique was wildly successful, right? It reformed him against these evil urges that he has, but it raises very interesting controls about, or very interesting questions about the role of the state.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know this for certain, but I can't, if Kubrick loved this book so much that he's quoting it in the New York Times, Ardrey goes on and on about West Side Story, and there are like musical theater aspects to Clockwork Orange, like not to, obviously the singing in the rain bit, but like the gang fights and things like that, which would have come from that.
Yeah, that's so interesting. I never would have brought up West Side Story, but it makes a lot of sense as you were sharing that.
Yeah. I should have. I was looking at some Google images and I had them side by side, and it's like, okay, that makes a lot of sense.
Interesting. It also brings Romeo and Juliet to my mind as another like example of that playing out.
Rose by any other name would be just as sweet, right?
Right. And then the version with Leonardo DiCaprio is potent with symbolism. That's probably all I can say today.
Yeah.
I haven't seen it in years.
Yeah.
But you also have the tribal aspect, and yeah.
Yep. Yeah, this is Alex's sword cane that he uses. And I think I want to look at a scene where he's using that sword cane, a very telling scene from, remember, this film came out in 1972. Well, like, you know, like we're finishing up our Apollo missions in 1972. All right, let's go to slide 9.
Okay.
All right.
Yeah.
Okay, do you remember this scene?
Yeah.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
in Clockwork Orange, the trunk under the bridge lamenting society's collapse suggests the 1969 moon landing has thrust humanity back to a primal state of nature, unraveling civilized laws, a theme resonant with Robert Ardrey's view of innate aggression in African Genesis. The visual echo between the Droog's white uniforms and the moonwalkers' spacesuits hints at a deeper Kubrickian allegory, linking technological triumph to societal decay. Could Kubrick be suggesting that this regression was orchestrated, a deliberate exposure of humanity's killer ape instincts, challenging Rousseau's idealized goodness and reflecting Ardrey's evolutionary realism? I'd like to read the quote from the drunk that they interrogate before they beat him senseless. So Alex has him pinned down. The tramp says, "Well, go on, do me in, you bastard cowards. I don't want to live anyway, not in a stinking world like this." And Alex says, "Oh, and what's so stinking about it?" And then the tramp says, "It's a stinking world because there's no law and order anymore. It's a stinking world because it lets the young get on to the old, like you done. Oh, it's no world for an old man any longer. What sort of a world is it at all? Men on the moon and men spinning around the earth, and there's no attention paid to earthly law and order no more." And I was born in 1980, so I didn't really live through the 60s or anything like that, so it's hard for me to say like what life was like before. But it does. I mean, the implication here is that the Apollo missions caused such a psychological shock to polite society that it start to eat away at the reverence for hierarchy and law and ethics. And I think the idea here is the Droogs are the manifestations of exactly what the tramp is talking about, is that it in some way fostered this animalistic regression, this collapse of civilization into the murderous these murderous criminals that are the focal point of Clockwork Orange.
That's a cool quote.
I mean, I don't know. I mean, there were a lot of things happening in the 60s, right? It wasn't, you had the assassination of JFK and RFK and Martin Luther King and the Haight-Ashbury movement and all this other stuff. Like how much chaos, how much of that was responsible for this inversion of values or this regression? And were the Apollo missions like the chef's kiss on this, or were they the main thing that did it? I don't know. I wasn't there. It's something I'm looking into. I found this journal from the University of Michigan that explores like the moon landing from a variety of different analytical psychology perspectives. And I can't recall too much of it right now, but there were people legitimately driven insane by the landing. It was such a cosmic shock to the psychological systems. I'm not saying this is widespread, but there were certain individuals who just lost their minds thinking about men walking across the surface of the moon. I think those are extreme examples. I think it's interesting to think about, what did that do to just like the average person? What did that normalize?
Yeah.
And did it thrust us back into a state of nature, a violent state of nature?
Yeah, I don't have an answer to that, but it's a very interesting line of inquiry.
No, I mean, you have. I'm springing all this on you, so how could you? It's a lot to take in. It's a lot to take in.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I don't know all the secrets of the universe. I don't have it all figured out.
I'm just making it up as I go.
Aren't we all?
Yeah. All right. Let's go to The Shining.
Yeah.
Okay. We've got
Our
Jack
third
in it.
weapon.
Our third weapon.
You can almost make a Stanley Kubrick video game.
Yeah. There are other movies where there are weapons. I thought about it, but these are the ones that are most obvious. Like Lolita has a gun.
Well, also these are all so far like sticks of some kinds.
Yeah, they are.
You know what I mean? They all have like the same shape, and like it feels more tactile. Like a gun is almost like removes you a little bit from the cause reaction, if that makes like obviously you have to pull the trigger, but it's a little bit different. Like the mechanism does a lot more for you. Like the tools we're looking at are all very like tactile manual tools.
Yeah. Well, so this is a lot's going to hinge on this. This particular type of axe, like this is just like, we looked earlier, like we had to look at the bones of the weapon, of the bone weapon. This is called a Seagrave pattern.
Huh.
And I think I want to call it an eagle beak Seagrave pattern, but I couldn't find that there was any consensus that it was called an eagle beak. That's like the pickaxe side of it. And the primary manufacturer of these fire axes was the Collins Company. Although I cannot get close enough on that axe to see if the Collins insignia is anywhere. My understanding is that it was specially made for the movie. I don't have any information for sure saying that this is a Collins axe, but Collins was the most popular manufacturer of the Seagrave axe. Okay, so that's going to be an important detail. In The Shining, Jack Torrance's fire axe channels Robert Ardrey's vision of humanity as tool-wielding killer apes, embodying primal aggression. Yet Jack's assault on the Overlook Hotel's door unveils a profound Kubrickian allegory, echoing Aldous Huxley's The Doors of Perception and William Blake's call to cleanse perception for infinite vision. This motif of shattering barriers seen in Dr. Strangelove's bomb doors unleashing chaos and 2001's plea to open the pod bay doors, Hal, parallels beating a dead horse, a rebuke of stagnant paradigms. The Seagrave fire axe, a signature design of axe manufacturer Collins, may evoke astronaut Michael Collins, the Apollo 11 solitary, or I don't know. They're not related, but it's interesting. It's called Collins, intimating that Kubrick has embedded a symbolic lexicon, a linguistic tool or set of tools within both his own and within both his on and off-world films to refresh our perspective and evolve beyond a decaying world's constraints. Unlike 2001's bone-igniting evolutionary leaps or A Clockwork Orange's violent artistry, Jack's axe, though mired in destruction, symbolizes tools that can unlock higher consciousness, aligning with Ardrey's dual-natured ingenuity and Kubrick's cryptic quest for transcendence. So, there's also, I think this axe is also a reference to a film. I think it's a film called The Carriage. But it's not just one for one. And could I be wrong about it being a Collins axe, or that's what Kubrick is trying to communicate? Totally. That's the thing. It's like there's always plausible deniability with this, and I recognize that there's a tendency to make connections where they may not be. But he breaks down so many different doors, and he's using this very familiar axe. I think it's forgivable to try to make that association.
I think so. It's really interesting. Not necessarily intended, but to me, like the back part of the axe, it also looks a little bit like a sickle. It's obviously not a sickle, much bigger.
And what would the sickle be connected to?
Saturn. Yeah, I know.
Saturn. There you
Yeah, I
go.
can move on. The sigil for Saturn is like a cross with a sickle kind of coming off of it.
Mm-hmm.
Is the best way I could describe it. But yeah, to me, it kind of brings in the Saturnian energy into it. But also, Saturn is a lot to do with like culling, with kind of the harder to swallow part of the harvest, as a
Yeah.
theme.
I mean, it definitely harvest or death.
Yeah.
I've got an image here. It's the film that he borrowed it from is called The Phantom Carriage. This is the best picture I can pull up. If you want to pull this up, I don't know if you can do that. So that I put it in. I put it in the private chat.
Yeah, one moment.
But yeah, that's an excellent point to see it as kind of Sith or whatever it's called.
Yeah, that's what it made me think of. Also, just have to massively admire the color palette and color like ratios in this shot. Oh my goodness, it's beautiful. You have the pastel. I'm getting off topic, but like the yellow and blue, almost like a nursery. Like those are often colors for a baby.
Mm-hmm.
And then him and like the red. I don't know.
Yeah. I think the red is important, given that he's in a murderous rage. But that's excellent. You picking out that Reaper vibe there with the axe. I'm sure that was of interest to him.
And here's what you shared. Oh yeah, this is.
I can't get a good enough picture right now to tell if he's got the Seagrave pattern axe. I don't think, from what I saw online, I don't think he does. I think that's a little addition Kubrick made, but maybe I can find. We got people. If people are with us this long, they'll.
You can take a moment.
Yeah, let me see if I get
it's
a closer.
Interesting too. This film from the 20s, it has Eraserhead kind of has this aesthetic.
It's interesting you should say that because Kubrick made the cast watch Eraserhead.
A lot, yeah.
Okay, so it is not a Seagrave pattern. It's just the regular flat X background. You can, if you want to pull it up for the audience, if you scroll down this link right here, people will be able to see. So yeah, that he's making a point by choosing that axe and making it have that pick. He's making a point, and I think I would say that your observation that it's a reference to Saturn. No, go to the Cinema Archives link in the private chat.
Oh, sorry.
The second link.
Yeah.
I think your case is probably stronger than what I said here, that it's a Collins fire axe and it's a reference to Michael Collins. Like, I'd say your case is stronger.
Why not both? I mean...
Yep. If you scroll down, you should be able to see it. It's like the third or fourth image.
There we go.
Or it was like the seventh. There it is. So you can see it doesn't have that pickaxe. It doesn't have that beak on the end of it. If it did have a beak and it was called an eagle, then clearly it would make my case stronger that it's a reference to the eagle has landed. So, but I couldn't find consensus that it is a reference to the eagle. Cool. So we solved that.
Sure.
All right. Should we go on to Full Metal Jacket, or you got something else to say about The Shining?
Yeah, let's do it.
I was like, before we went on, I was like, this will take a half hour.
It never does.
Yeah, no. All right.
I'm sorry, I'm engaged.
Yeah. So we got Gomer Pyle here.
That's right.
In Full Metal Jacket, Private Pyle's transformation into a rifle-wielding killer under the dehumanizing crucible of Paris Island's drill instruction vividly embodies Robert Ardrey's killer ape hypothesis, which frames humans as inherently aggressive and tool-using. The brutal training led by Drill Sergeant Hartman's relentless verbal and physical abuse strips Pyle and the recruits of individuality, regressing them to a primal Australopithecine state where their rifles, modern echoes of 2001's Bone, become extensions of predatory instincts. This dehumanization fosters Ardrey's amity-imity complex from the territorial imperative as the recruits forge unit cohesion through chants and drills while channeling hostility toward enemies, culminating in Pyle's murderous breakdown. Kubrick's portrayal of this militarized aggression, linking Full Metal Jacket to A Clockwork Orange Drooges and the Shining's axe, underscores Ardrey's view of humanity's dual-natured ingenuity, exposing the violent legacy beneath disciplined facades. And I showed this to Jordan earlier today when they were doing this collective chant when they were sleeping with their rifles. This is my rifle. There are many like it, but this one's mine. My rifle is my best friend. It is my life. I must master it as I must master my life. Without me, the rifle is useless. Without my rifle, I am useless. I must fire my rifle true. I must shoot straighter than my enemy who is trying to kill me. I must shoot him before he shoots me. I will. Before God, I swear this creed, my rifle and myself are defenders of my country. We are the masters of our enemy. We are the survivors of my life. So be it until there is no enemy but peace. Amen. That's crazy. Like, it's so you can see what he's talking about here, or what I'm saying. You see the what Ardrey's talking about in regards to the amity complex and its application to Full Metal Jacket, where clearly this weapon is going to give an advantage over the other.
Yeah.
And you see here, Pyle, pleasant, affable Pyle is reduced to this homicidal maniac that takes revenge on Hartman for all the abuse that's been layered upon him. And, what do you, this is what happens when you dehumanize people in this way. Should you be so surprised that they revert back to the killer ape that Ardrey talked about in African Genesis?
It's intense. It's a very fascinating, I don't know what you call it, like mantra?
Which this is my rifle?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, there's a lot there.
Well, yeah, there is. Well, Jordan, we're coming up on an hour. I mean,
yeah.
I
wanted to inject.
Yeah.
We were talking about this earlier, and someone in some Twitter comment somewhere basically was applying this is my rifle speech to the smartphone. And now that we've gone through this presentation and you're talking about the amity, I'm going to mess it up, but in-group, out-group.
Yeah, the amity complex.
Yes. So the, becoming tighter with those in your in-group and being like more and more repulsed by your out-group, and thinking about the phones and thinking about like social media and the dynamics there and all of the division that just seems to be spiraling for those who wish to participate into it. I don't know. I'm just thinking about that application to the phone in a new way. And I'm curious about what Kubrick might have created if he were making films in 2025, where technology has gone.
Well, what does the phone look like?
Yeah, it's a monolith.
It's a monolith, right?
It is a monolith.
And if you read the book, 2001, it's perhaps less obvious in the film, but the monoliths are, they have they have projected images on them to teach the apes things. So like we're in the same position as the apes with this technology, which raises very interesting questions about, how does today's science fiction become tomorrow's science fact?
Yeah.
So, and clearly there are those of us who, you can see this within our own society, right? Like compare the younger generations to the older generations in terms of available information, right? Like right now, like the generational dynamics are like totally F because like, boomers don't really know how to use computers and the younger people do. And for those that have the will and desire, are getting such incredible downloads of more advancements of understanding through the use of technology than really could be provided through the academic institutions. And it's creating a new type of stratification within society. And it's like, where is this going to go with the people who are jacking into the technology? I've started using Grok over the past 6 weeks, and I feel an acceleration through that. And there are a lot of people who won't use it because they see it as lazy or something like that. I'm trying to figure out how to use it to accelerate the amount of material I can cover or the amount that I can write. I've long opined that I needed, a group of grad students just to try to get my mind around this book that I'm writing. But now, like, I don't have to wait for that. I've got Grok. So, what's happening as we engage with these technologies, these tools, these weapons? What's going to happen? And those who don't use them, what's going to happen to them? Like, are they going to go the way of the subjugated ape men in 2001 that were annihilated with the use of the bone weapon? Like, what's happening?
I think it's nuanced because there is this aspect of, in many ways, you have to master the technology to not get left behind. And the rifle, it's like the government is using the dynamic between the man and the rifle, the man and the technology, to further an end that is not necessarily in the individual self-interest of the human, right? Like, where are we being used potentially? And I don't even mean directly from the phone, but I don't know. Like, it's an underdeveloped thought.
Right. I mean, this isn't, the individuals are not progressed as much as like a collective society, right? A lot of these guys are going to die in Vietnam despite the use of that. And like, what end is that ultimately going to further? A lot of people would think nefarious ones with the Vietnam War. A lot of people didn't think that was a just war or that we properly won it. So,
well, and this idea of without me, my rifle is useless. Without my rifle, I am useless. This story that we are useless without the technology, I do think is a dangerous story, potentially.
Or like you were intimating, how our desire to wield tools and weapons can be hijacked for means beyond our understanding. So like, just as the grunts, as they're being dehumanized and given these weapons to overcome a foreign enemy, we're being, easily it could be a total trap while we're given I've said this elsewhere, we're given this technology and you think you're advancing yourself. You think you're ascending some sort of hierarchy within the society and that you're the smartest guy in the room, when in reality, you've been used for ends that you can't even comprehend. And truthfully, I think both are happening.
Yeah.
So to be continued. I think there's a lot to still say about that.
I think so. And I think you're right. I think it's both. But
yeah,
I think we're massively underappreciating how much we are being used.
Well, I think, and why I think this is going to be a part 2, why there's going to be a part 2 of this, and I'm going to read the territorial imperative, is that, we've looked at evolution from the past and the present day through Kubrick's films, right? But there's like a lot of future evolution in Kubrick. We haven't looked, the men of the future like Dave, who seems not as human as Hal in 2001. So there's going to be, where this is going with tool use is going to have to take into consideration things like AI, and not just in 2001, but also I think I probably need to go back and rewatch the collaboration between Spielberg and Kubrick, Artificial Intelligence, which is like modern, it's like this futuristic retelling of the Pinocchio story. And there are beings from the future there, not only in terms of AI, but there's towards the end of the movie, there are beings that even transcend the robots in there. So I thought about trying to get it done for this, but it was even more speculative than what I've done already, and I need more time to think about it.
Yeah, that's totally fair. This was awesome. I really enjoyed it.
Good. I'm glad. I thought it was pretty interesting.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Let's bring it to a close if that's okay.
That sounds great. Thanks, Luke.
All right. See you guys.